Okay, so here we're going to work through the paper 2 progress check from after Easter. So this is one where your calculator is allowed. That doesn't mean you need to use it for every single question, but it means that when you need it, it's going to be there for you. Okay, so question 1A, indices. So we're multiplying two expressions with the same base. They're both x. When we multiply them, it means we can add their powers. So that's going to be whatever x to the power of 3 plus 6 is, which is x to the 9. 1 mark. Just right or wrong. With the next one, it's important you don't just guess, that you actually work out what this is. So they're putting brackets because the second one has got this minus outside it. If there's no number outside it, what is there is a 1. So when you multiply that out, you're going to do 1 times 7x, which is 7x. 1 times minus 5y will be minus 5y. So you can just remove the brackets. But with this second one, because it's a minus, it's going to be minus 1 times 3x, which will be minus 3x. And then it will also be minus 1 times 2y, which will be minus 2y. The most common mistake is people forget that second one. So I got 7x take away 3x, which is 4x. And then minus 5y, and we're taking off another 2. It's not minus times a minus is a plus, because we finished all the multiplying when we're clearing out the brackets. It's just minus 5y on the number line, going down another 2 spaces to minus 7y. So you're looking for 4x minus 7y. And then part C, the car travels x miles in 30 minutes. Its average speed in miles per hour is. So what you've got to spot here is that you can't just divide by 30 because that's minutes. You want it in miles per hour, and 30 minutes is half an hour. So distance, speed is distance over time, which is x over 0.5. Now that isn't an answer that is on your list. X divided by 2 is different to x divided by 0.5. So what you need to do here is think about, well, if it's gone x miles in 30 minutes, how far will it go in an hour? It's twice as much time, it'll travel twice as far. So if it's gone x miles in 30 minutes, in an hour, it'll go 2x miles. So we've got B1 there and B1 there. Question 2. The company has 2 sites. One is in North Wales and the other is in South Wales. The pie charts show the distribution of its 96 part-time staff and its 150 full-time staff. So let's just make sure we're understanding that. So this is the pie chart for part-time. That pie chart represents 96 staff, a quarter of whom work in North Wales. How do I know it's a quarter? Because that's 90 degrees and the full slice will be 360. And then the full-time staff, this pie represents 150, and 144 degrees out of that big pie, 360, are based in North Wales. A person is chosen at random from the company's 246 staff members. So that's the 150 and the 96. What is the probability that this person works at the site in North Wales? So first thing I need to do is work out how many of his staff work in North Wales. So with this one, it's quite straightforward because we've got that angle of 90 degrees. We know it's a quarter. So North Wales will be 96 divided by 4, 24. So there's 24 staff who are part-time working in North Wales, And then for this one, to work out that quantity, rather than a quarter, I know that this fraction is 144 degrees out of the 360. So we're going to be doing 144 out of 360, and that proportion is of the 150. So because we're allowed to use a calculator, we can type that onto our calculator exactly as we see it. So fraction button, 144 out of 360 times by 150, 60. So there's 60 members of staff, 60 full-time members of staff who work in North Wales. So the person is chosen at random from the company's 246 staff members. What is the probability that the person works at a site in North Wales? So the total number of North Walians is going to be 84. Oh, excuse me. And in order to work that as a probability, oh, excuse me again. In order to work that as a probability, we need to put as a fraction out of the total, which is 246. And we don't need to simplify that. It's not asking us to. We could put it onto the calculator, but there's no need. So those 4 marks, you can have a method mark for working out the number of North Walians, and an answer mark for getting those right. Then there will be a mark for getting the top number right in the fraction, and a mark for getting the bottom number right. Question 3, trial and improvement. So this was something you practiced while I was off with COVID. It's always worth 4 marks, and it's an easy thing to revise. So a solution to the equation x cubed plus 3x equals 20 lies between 2 and 3. Use the method of trial and improvement to find the solution correct to 1 decimal place, and you must show all your working. So because we want our answer to 1 decimal place and it lives between 2 and 3, we can list all the possible answers that could exist. So the smallest it could be is 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9 and 3.0. One of those is going to be my final answer, but in order to earn the marks, you've got to search to find out which one it is. And what we want to do is to choose a starting point which will eliminate as many of those as possible. So we usually start in the middle. So we let x equal 2.5. And then in our formula, instead of the x, I'm going to replace it with 2.5, and the x breaks up to be a pair of brackets. So I'm going to have 2.5 cubed plus 3 bracket 2.5. And I want to work out what that is. So I'm going back to my calculator, and on my calculator I'm going to type that exactly as I've written it. So open bracket 2.5, close bracket, and then the x cubed button is just above the x squared. So it's shift x squared plus 3 bracket 2.5 close bracket. So if x equals 2.5 was the solution, then we'd end up with 23.125. I'm looking for a value of 20, so that's too large. So that means there's no point me looking at any value bigger than 2.5, because anything bigger than 2.5 is going to take me further away from 20. So I've now narrowed my choice down. Okay, so now I'm going to go sort of halfway again, still working to 1 decimal place though. So I'm either going to choose 2.2 or 2.3, doesn't matter. So we'll try x equals 2.2. So that would be 2.2 cubed plus 3 bracket 2.2. Where it says you must show all your working, that's what we're doing. You don't need to retype that into your calculator. You can use the cursor buttons to go back up, delete 2.2, delete 2.2. So that gives me 17.248, which is too small. It's smaller than 20. So that means there's no point trying anything smaller than 2.2. So I've now limited my possible answers to 4 of them. Now I'm going to try 2.3, 2.3 cubed plus 3 bracket 2.3, so that's still too small. So that means I can eliminate that one. So I'm going to go 2.4. And what you're trying to do here is to keep going until you've only got 2 consecutive values left. Only 2 consecutive values left. So 2.4 is going to give me that. 2.4 cubed plus 3 bracket 2.4. .024. So that's too large. So that eliminates that one. So you keep doing that until you end up with 2 consecutive 1 decimal place numbers left. That is your method and your first answer mark. So the method is plugging in and searching. The first answer mark, to get half marks, you're searching until you're between 2 consecutive 1 decimal place numbers. In this case, if they asked you to go to 2, you'd have to keep going to 2. So once you've got it to that point, you can say, so x is either 2.3 or 2.4 to 1 decimal place. So then on my number line I've got to do one more thing. In order to decide which one of these it is, I have to go halfway between those. And when I go halfway between those, I'm then working to 2 decimal places. So what we do is we try that. If that gives an answer which is too large, then it isn't going to be anything on that side. And everything on this side to 1 decimal place will round to 2.3. If that works out to be too small, then it means everything here is going to be too small, and every value that side rounds to 2.4. So try x equals 2.35. 2.35 cubed plus 3 bracket 2.35. So this is the last bit of calculation that we have to do. 3, 5. So that's too large. 20.027, too large. So everything there is going to be too large. X equals 2.3 to 1 decimal place. So the last 2 marks is the method of going halfway and then using that outcome to decide which of those it's going to be. So those are the 4 marks. The most common grumble I get off students is, oh, it's a lot of work for 4 marks. Well, you're going to have a lot of time spare in this exam. Remember, in that length of time, you're going to have a lot of questions that you won't be able to answer, so it's important on the questions that you can answer that you do a good job. And it's easy to revise. Question 4. Expand x bracket x squared plus 7. So we just have to multiply what's outside by everything that's in. So x times x squared is x cubed, and x times 7 is 7x. 2 marks. 1 mark if you get the x cubed, 1 mark if you get the 7x. Expand and simplify. So for this one now, you have to multiply everything in this by everything by that, which you were taught FOIL. So first, 3x squared. Outside, x times minus 4 is minus 4x. Inside, minus 15x. And then last, 5 times 4 is 20. Be careful with the signs. Minus times a minus, the signs are the same. The answer is positive. 1 mark if you've done that. But to simplify, there's no other x squared terms, so that stays like that. And then I got minus 4x on my number line, and I'm going down another 15 places. I end up at minus 19x plus 20. And that will give you then the final answer or accuracy mark. Excuse me. Hay fever time, I think. Okay, B. This is an inequalities question. Sarah buys and sells antique clocks. On Monday, Sarah had N clocks. At the end of the day on Tuesday, she had 5 times as many clocks as she had on Monday. On Wednesday, she sold 27 clocks. At the end of the day on Wednesday, Sarah had fewer clocks than she had on Monday. Write an inequality in terms of N that shows this information. Okay, so on Monday she had N clocks. At the end of the day on Tuesday she had 5 times as many. Okay, so what you have to be clear in your head is if she's had 5 times as many, does that mean 5n or n plus 5? And if you're not sure, then just replace n with a number. If n was 10 clocks and she had 5 times as many, would she end up with n times 5, which would be 50, or would she end up with n 10 plus 5, which is 15? With a number, it's more obvious that it's going to be 50 or 5n. So 5 times as many means 5n. 5 more would be when you'd add. So times many, you'd multiply more or less. With less, you'd subtract. So on Wednesday, she sold 27 of the clocks. So on Tuesday, she had 5n clocks. Then she sold 27. So out of that 50, if n was 10, you would be taking away 27. At the end of the day on Wednesday, Sarah had fewer clocks than she had on Monday. So on Wednesday, she had 5n minus 27. And on Monday, she had n. So all we need to do for the inequality is to decide what I'm going to put in there. It's not equality. If it had the same number, then we put an equal sign. With an inequality, it points to the smaller quantity. So if she had fewer clocks on Wednesday than she had on Monday, that means that 5n minus 27 is less than what she started with on Monday. So there's 2 marks for that. 1 for the 5n minus 27 and the n, and 1 for the correct symbol, the correct inequality. Solve your inequality to find the greatest number of clocks that Sarah could have had on Monday. So I want to work out what n could be. when we're solving an inequality, we treat it in exactly the same way as we would if we were solving that as an equation. The only difference comes if we end up multiplying or dividing by a negative number. If that happens, we flip the inequality to the opposite direction. That's not going to happen in this case. The first thing I'm going to do is to try and get the 5n on its own by getting rid of the 27. It's a minus, so I have to add 27 to that side. And to keep the balance, that means I have to add 27 to that side as well. So on this side now, I'm left with 5n, and on this side, n plus 27. Now I've got n on both sides. I want to get rid of that n, and I do that by taking n off. If I take n off that side, I have to do the same for that side. 5n take away n is 4n is less than 27. Now to get the n on its own, it's joined to the 4 by a multiply, so I have to divide, and if I divide that, I have to divide that by 4 as well. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, leaves me n. 27 divided by 4 is 27 over 4. Now you're on a calculator paper, so you can do 27 divided by 4, which is 6.75. So n, the number of clocks, is less than 6.75. So the most that n could be is 6. It can't be 7 because 7 is bigger than that. And they want the greatest number of clocks. So greatest number of clocks is 6. Okay, so the marks for that, you'd have a method mark for solving your equation down to 4n is less than 27, an answer mark for n being less than 6.75, and then a final mark for interpreting the context to say, well, if n is a clock, you can't have 0.75 of a clock, so it must be 6. Okay, the lengths of the sides of a rectangle are given as 24 centimeters and 15 centimeters. Each measurement is given correct to the nearest centimeter. Calculate the difference between the greatest possible perimeter of the rectangle and the least possible perimeter of the rectangle. So here's my rectangle. It's 24 centimeters by, put that underneath, not that it matters, and 15 centimeters there. Now remember, you're in a higher tier exam. This is going to be at least a grade C, but in fact a grade B question. So you are looking for it to be more complicated than just working out the perimeter of that. We practiced these when we were getting ready for the numeracy exam. The key, what makes this more complicated, is that the measurements have been rounded. Remember, when that's the case, then we've actually got maximum and minimum values that length could be. It could be as small as 23.5, because everything above 23.5 will round to 24. And it could be as large as 24.5. Now, I'll mention this again, but we discussed this at length when we were revising this. We know that 24.5 we would round up to 25. But we're talking here just about those boundaries, the limits between where you round down and where you round up. So the maximum and minimum, we use those values. We couldn't use 24.4 because if it was 24.43 or 48, then that would round as well. So you use those two extremes, and you do the same then for this value. So that could be as large as 15.5 and as small as 14.5. So for that perimeter, the distance around that shape to be at its maximum, then we would want those sides to be as long as possible. So there'd be 24.5 plus the opposite, which would be the same, plus 15.5 plus 15.5. So 24.5 plus 24.5 plus 15.5 plus 15.5. So that's 80 centimeters. So the maximum that perimeter could be is 80. The minimum perimeter is if you had 23.5 plus 23.5 plus 14.5 plus 14.5. .76 centimeters. Calculate the difference between the greatest possible perimeter, 80, and the least possible perimeter, 76. So the difference between the two will be 80 take away 76 is 4 centimeters. So marks for that, you'd have 1 mark for recognizing you're working with those maximum and minimum values. You'd have 1 mark for working out the 80 and the 76, and 1 mark for the difference between them. Generally they're easy questions, but you've got to notice that it is one of those questions, and the clue is always they'll tell you what they've been rounded to. So as soon as you see measurements and roundings, it's likely to be one of those questions. Question 6. This is grade B, where it's an equation containing fractions, and what we need to do is get rid of the fractions, and we do that by multiplying by the lowest common multiple of the numbers on the bottom. So the lowest common multiple, the smallest number that is in both the 2 times table and the 6 times table, and in this case that's 2 as well. So the smallest number that is in the 2 times table and the 6 times table, so you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., and 6, 12, 18, etc. Smallest number that's in both is 6. So the LCM is 6. So you multiply every bit of it by 6. So we have 6 times this part, 6 times this part, and 6 times this part. And note that I'm using brackets when I'm saying the word times. I'm writing brackets. Now that helps us get rid of the fraction, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. So instead of having the 6 divided by 2, I got 3. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the fraction is gone. Now I can get rid of the brackets, so that's got a 3 outside it. So that's going to be 3 times 4, 12x, 3 times minus 3, minus 9, plus 1 times 7, 7x, 1 times 1, 1. And that's equal to 3 lots of 29, 87. Okay, I can do a bit of tidying here before working with the equation. So we've got 12x plus 7x, 19x, minus 9, add 1, minus 8, equals 87. I'm going to add 8 to both sides to get rid of it from there, leaving me 19x on that side and 95 on that side. Now to get the 19 on its own, I've got to divide by 19, which means I have to divide that by 19, leaving me x equals 95 over 19, which is 5. Okay, 4 marks. So we're going to have 1 mark for multiplying throughout by the LCM. You're going to have 1 mark for getting rid of the brackets. Gets us to there. Then we're going to have 1 mark for getting it down to 19x is 95, and 1 mark for your final answer. Okay, so that's how we deal with equations where there are numbers on the bottom of the fraction, the denominator. You've just got to learn multiply throughout by the LCM. That's a grade B equation. Question 7. The diagram shows 2 right-angle triangles. You see that, and that's a trigger for Pythag or trig. Joined together along a common side. So we've got SPQ, so SPQ is that angle, is 90. SQR, that angle is 90. SQP is 38. PS is 8 centimeters, so that's a length, and QR is 15 centimeters. And they need us to find the size of angle X. So it's going to be trig. So I'm going to write those down. In this triangle, to work out that angle, I'm going to need to use that. And that is my opposite. This is my hypotenuse. And I don't know that side. Now, in order to work out that angle, I need to know 2 sides. At the moment, I only know 1 side. So there's not enough in that triangle to answer the question. And if that was the case, and I knew that side, it wouldn't be worth 6 marks. So I need to work out what SQ is. Now SQ is also living in this triangle here. So if I just draw that triangle first of all, so that I'm not confused by all the information I've got. So this is triangle SQP. I know that that is 8, and I know that that is 38, and I want to work out what that side is, because if I know that side, then in that triangle I've got enough information to work out that. So I need to label my sides here. That's my opposite. This is my hypotenuse. That's my adjacent. I need to have the opposite in my workings because I know it. And of course I need to have the hypotenuse in my workings because I need to find it. So I'm looking for the relationship that links opposite and hypotenuse. It's only one of those that contains opposite and hypotenuse, which is sine. So I'm going to use SOH. Then you've got to work out how it's going to be written. And we're trying to find the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse, when you cover it up, leaves you a fraction, O over S. So hyp equals op over sine, and wherever you're writing sine, it's followed by the angle. Either the angle you know or the one you're trying to find. So to work out what SQ is, I've got the opposite side, which is 8, over the adjacent side, which is sine 38. On my calculator, I can put that in exactly as I've written it. So fraction button, 8 on top, sine, and when you see, you press the sine button, it automatically opens up, and then you want to put 38 in there and close it. It's important, especially if you've got an older brother or sister whose calculator you've borrowed and might do A-level maths, that there says D in it for degrees. If it doesn't, I'll show you at the end what you need to do to change that. So anyway, so SQ is going to be 12.99 centimeters, which is going to be, when you round it, 13 centimeters. All the measurements you've been given are rounded to the nearest whole number, so you can round that to the nearest whole number. So now let's just ignore that triangle and use this triangle. So if we drawing, bad drawing Jonesy, S, Q, R, X is what I want to find. I now know.
Interruption. Would Flo Croxford, that's Flo Croxford, please come to reception.
I now know that SQ is 13, and I know that this is 15. So I've already labelled it up here, but I'll do that again down here. So that's the hype, this is the op, this is the edge. I need to have the two, because it's the angle I'm trying to find, I need to have the trig ratio, which has got two sides I know. So opposite and adjacent. The only one with opposite and adjacent is tan. Because it's the angle you're trying to find, that's attached to the T for tan. So tan is opposite over adjacent. So tan X is op over adj. Tan X is opposite 15 over adjacent 13. Now, if you know the angle, then you're just going to be pressing the sine button, the cos button, the tan button. If you're trying to find the angle, you've got to do the opposite, which you can see in orange above. Hopefully on your calculator it's not clear from where I'm sitting, but it's sine minus 1, cos minus 1, tan minus 1. So to get the x, you've got to do the opposite of tanning, which is tan minus 1 of 15 over 13. So on your calculator, shift tan, and then inside there I want my fraction. It's going to have a 15 on the top of it and a 13 on the bottom. Close bracket and round to nearest whole number. It's going to be 49 degrees. 6 marks for that. First is for the getting the 13. So it's a method for correctly getting the sign and in the right order. So that over that. So you're going to have 1 mark for 8 over sine 38 and 1 mark for the 13. And then the same with this one. A method for getting the tan is 15 over 13. Answer for the inverse tan part, and the 6th mark for getting 49 degrees, or if you've written it out as, it doesn't matter if you put that as 49.085, etc, etc. So that's trig, grade B. Question 8, probability tree. So Alwena regularly travels from Anglesey to Cardiff to attend meetings. For each meeting, she chooses one of 3 ways to travel: plane, train or car. The probability of a meeting being held on a Saturday is 0.08. The probability that Alwena travels by plane is 0.15. The probability she travels by train is 0.45. Her decision on how to travel is independent of the day in which the meeting is held, so there's no relationship between the two. Complete the following tree diagram. So there's one of these on the paper one as well. The branches have to add up to 1. It's either going to be on a Saturday or not on a Saturday. So this is going to be 1 minus 0.08, which is 0.92. These branches have to add up to 1 as well. So 1 minus 0.15 minus 0.45 is 0.4. And this is just a repeat of that, because you're either going to end up down here, not on a Saturday, or up here on a Saturday. So that's also going to be 0.15, 0.45, 0.4. 3 marks for that. 1 mark for the 0.92. 1 mark for that completed branch. And 1 mark for repeating. A meeting is chosen at random. Calculate the probability that the meeting is held on a Saturday. So I'm going up this branch. and that Alwena travels by plane or by car. So there's two different possibilities here. So when you're ANDing, you're multiplying. So it's either going to be 0.08 multiplied by plane, 0.15, or back to the start, 0.08 multiplied by car, 0.4. And when you're using the word or, you add them. So Saturday and plane, or Saturday and car. And in probability is multiply, or in probability is add. So on a calculator, we can put that in as we see it. Let's just try and get the light. It isn't great in my room. 0.08 multiplied by 0.15 plus 0.08 multiplied by 0.4, close bracket. So there's a 0.044 chance of her travelling on a Saturday either by plane or by car. That's a really small number, but when you think about it, it's really unlikely that they're going to be travelling on a Saturday. Most of the probability is not on a Saturday. 3 marks for that. Method mark and answer mark or accuracy mark for that. So that times that plus that times that, and then final mark for working that out. Okay, question 9, simultaneous equations. Again, something that you covered when I was off with COVID. So we've got 2 equations with 2 unknowns. The method that I went through on the introduction clip to that is, first of all, number your equations. So the top one is equation number 1, the bottom one is equation number 2. There's lots of different ways of approaching a simultaneous equation and correctly solving it. I've just shown you one so that you're not getting confused by choice. You multiply the first equation by the number in front of the x in the second. So equation 1, I'm multiplying by 7. So 7 times 3x is 21x. 7 times minus 2y is minus 14y. And 14 times 7 is 98. And then you multiply equation 2 by the number that's in front of the x in the first equation, because what we want to do is to make the x's the same. So in this one we're going to end up with 7 times 3 is 21x, good. 3 times 3, 9y. And 25 times 3, which is 75. And we call those equation 3 and equation 4. Now that we've made those the same, it means we can subtract these 2 equations. 3 take away 4, and the x terms go. 21x take away 21x is 0. Now with this one, I've got to do minus 14 take away 9. Okay, minus 14 take away plus 9 is so if you want to see this on the calculator, minus 14 take away 9 is minus 23, because that is going to become minus a plus, becomes a minus. So that's the same as minus 14 take away another 9. So you end up with minus 23y equals 98 take away 75. Oops. 98 take away 75 is 23. So we get minus 23y is 23. To get the y on its own, I've got to do the opposite. Remember that 23 is joined to the y by a times. So I have to divide by minus 23. That means I have to divide that side by minus 23 as well. That will leave me y on this side, and on the other side 23 divided by minus 23 is minus 1. Plus divided by minus, same as when you're multiplying. If the signs are opposite, the answer is negative. So y is minus 1. What I then have to do is substitute that into any one of these equations to work out what x is. So if I plonk it in equation 1, so substitute in 1, 3x minus 2, if I'm replacing a letter, I'm using a bracket, minus 1 equals 14. 3x, 2 times 1 is 2, minus times a minus is a plus, equals 14. I want to take 2 off there, means I've got to take 2 off there as well. 3x equals 12, divide by 3, divide by 3, x equals 12 divided by 3, 4. Method mark for eliminating the x's, so getting it down to there. Answer mark for finishing that equation. Method mark for substituting what you've got back into one of the original equations. Answer mark for your final answer. So that's simultaneous equations. Then question 10. It's at the end of the paper. It's going to be a grade E transformation. In the following triangle, ABC has been enlarged to triangle DEF. So that one has become that one. Now it's telling you it's an enlargement, and it's also telling you the center is there. So whereas this could sometimes be worth more than that, and them asking you what the transformation is, you know it's enlarged, you know it's from there. Write down the scale factor. So BC becomes FE. BC is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares. FE is 4 squares. So the scale factor is a half, because the size of it has been halved, but it's also been flipped. It's also been turned on its head, so that is a negative scale factor. That's the only higher tier transformation question. All the others will be in the first half of the paper. B1 if you've got the half, B1 if you've also got that it's negative. So if that question had just said what has happened, then you would be saying it's an enlargement of scale factor minus a half, and then if you needed to work out where the center was, you would join up the corresponding sides. So that side becomes that side ends up over there, and where these pink lines cross are where the center of enlargement lies. But as I said, they're telling it you in this particular question. And then the final question, which again sadly you did when I was off on COVID, it's telling you to use the quadratic formula. Sometimes it doesn't tell you that, it just asks you to solve it, and then the clue is that you've got to get your answer to a certain number of decimal places. You're given the quadratic formula. Okay, so here's a higher tier paper. The quadratic formula is there for an ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so the number in front of the w squared is a 1. Then you've got the 5, then you've got the 7. So a is the number in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x, which in this case it's w, but it's exactly the same, 5. And c will be minus 7. Okay, so x equals minus b, so it'll be minus, remember when you replace a letter with a number, shove it in a bracket first of all. So it'll be minus 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, which is 1. Okay, now we can start tidying this up. So x equals minus times a plus, minus 5, plus or minus. 5 squared is 25. 4 times 1 is 4, times 7 is 28. Minus times a minus is a plus. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 28, 53, all over 2. I can't simplify that anymore, and at that point I then have to break up this plus or minus. So now you say either x equals minus 5 plus the square root of 53 all over 2. And on your calculator, we're going to put it in just like that. So we get the light in the right place. Fraction button, minus 5 plus square root of 53 underneath 2 equals 1.2 decimal places, 1.14. Or we take the other root, which is minus 5 minus square root of 53 all over 2. And I can just go into my formula and change that plus to a takeaway, and I get minus 6.14. And those are the two possible answers. Now, if you ended up getting that wrong there and having that as minus 28, then you'd have the square root of 25 take away 28 minus 3. What will happen then is you'll get an error when you try to work out the square root of minus 3. You can't get a square root of a negative number. If you went on to higher level maths, there are ways around that, but for us, if you get an error out of that, then it means that you've got a negative square root there and you've got the sign wrong there. Just change it to a plus and you're likely to get it right. So, marks. M1 for correctly substituting everything into the formula. A1 for the 1.14. A1 for the minus 6.14. So because you're given that formula at the start of the exam, that's pretty straightforward, 3 marks to get. You're going to get that on a paper 2. It won't come up on a paper 1, and it's easy marks. Okay, so that's all the solutions for the paper 2 that you sat.